Ladies and gentlemen, this is El Cochino, Tom Lawler, and I'd like to welcome you to the podcast that puts the lotion on its own skin, LuchaWorld. Bitchin'.
Welcome everyone to LuchaWorld Podcast, episode number 126. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we will recap CMLL's Copa Junior VIP show, which streamed on Ticketmaster Live this past Friday, March 26th. It only aired live, so you had to pay for it to watch it that very day. Unfortunately, as I said previously, Ticketmaster Live does not have a VOD option, so if you didn't watch it live, pretty much you're left to figure out ways to find it, either from somebody who either recorded the show some way, somehow, or maybe if it re-airs at a later date, like on Samurai TV in Japan, maybe someone will upload that version, which is clipped. Honestly, usually the CMLL shows that air, that are the big shows that air on Samurai TV, are usually clipped down to like an hour 50, 2 hours. So, and they usually just clip the undercard, and for the most part, they air a large chunk of the main events, since those are really the matches that they want to show. Unless there's an undercard match with someone from Japan that's on, from New Japan Pro Wrestling that's on the show. But for the most part, they try to air the as much as possible of the show, and maybe that way, those who missed out on it, you might be able to see it that way. It's an unfortunate thing that Ticketmaster Live and CMLL don't realize that they're losing money not making this available beyond watching it live, and it's very difficult. I actually watched it just because I was home, but if they continue this down the road, especially as the pandemic, if there is an end to this pandemic and we return to some level of normalcy, and they continue to do Ticketmaster Live as an option for those who can't attend Arena Mexico, who don't live in Mexico City, I don't know how we're going to be able to watch this, because a lot of us, Friday nights are usually nights where a lot of us go out, or, we might be busy, something comes up and we're watching something else, or we're, visiting family or friends, or, whatever, something comes up, and so it's going to be difficult to watch those shows. So I don't know. I kind of think CML at some point has to figure this out. And the one thing I will say is that for the most part, as far as a partner in the streaming service, considering CML has used other services in the past, Ticketmaster Live, as it's streaming live, like in real time, it actually, I have fewer issues with it. For the most part, if there's any issues, it's usually on my end, because my internet might slow down, or something might happen to it, or my browser or whatever I'm watching it on gets a little bit, the computer, something gets wonky with it. But for the most part, I haven't had any issues with their service. The times I've watched it, it's an unfortunate thing where you can't really rewind. You can't go back and watch something, or there's no VOD option where you could watch it later on. But as far as the live experience, it's actually pretty good compared to what I've had from what I've seen from other services that CMLL and other lucha promotions have used, where the feed won't even start up, or it'll be absolutely awful. To be fair, though, CMLL continued the tradition of opening the show without any audio for the announcers, which is a time-honored tradition in CMLL. I will say that they did fix it, but for whatever reason, and I think most of you who have watched CMLL shows in the past will also notice that for whatever reason, their audio is really loud. Like, it's like at a if you watch the Spinal Tap movie, there's they always went to the, when they show that knob for the volume, they always go to the 11th decibel. It kind of seems like CMLL does that for their shows. I didn't notice it at first, but when I put it on, when I switched over to headphones, it was really loud. I think I lowered my audio down to like half of what I normally use for anything else, any other service, be it when I watch on YouTube or WWE Network or Netflix, anything else. I had to lower it. I don't know what the deal is with CMLL, their audio, but that was really the only issue. As far as video, it was perfectly fine. I had no problems with the show. They're still empty arena matches. Their shows. It's not. There's no people attending. I think maybe they have some of the staff members in the crowd, but it's not very noticeable, and you don't really see anybody nearby. They have two ring girls. That's basically all they have. Erica and I think Shida was the other one. And that's basically it. And then obviously the two referees. They don't have any of the older referees. The refereeing on this show was done by Olympico, and I think Ed Noriega were the only two that were handling officiating, since it was only 4 matches. I thought the show at certain points was dragging on just because, especially during the Copa Junior VIP, it kind of felt like the match was just going on and on and on. But I think the show was actually somewhere in the 2.5 hour, 3 hour range. So it wasn't that bad of a time. I think the one thing I will say is that from the women's match, the Copa Junior VIP, and the main event, the effort was very strong in those 3 matches. The one match that really the effort can be questioned is the trios title match. I don't know if it was so much the effort, really, I guess you could say it's the effort, just because the guys were pretty much just going by the numbers and doing the same stuff they always do in their matches. But overall, I thought the show was good. I would definitely recommend watching the main event. The other 3 matches, I mean, if you don't watch them, you're not going to lose any sleep over it. The show started off with the women's match, which on Wednesday, CMLL Informa, Julio Cesar Rivera just clarified that this would not be for the national women's tag team titles. La Jarochita and Lluvia are the current champions, and they actually brought out the titles, and they actually wore matching outfits, which I thought was really cool. Same thing with Dallas and Stephanie Vacker. They wore matching robes. So that was kind of a cool thing to see, that they were kind of putting in a little more time in as far as what the tag teams are supposed to look like. And I thought that was a nice little bonus as far as the women doing that. The match itself I thought was okay. I really liked Jarochita and Stephanie Vacker in the match. Lluvia tried her best as well. Dallas, I think the one thing I will give Dallas credit for is that she didn't turn this into the Dallas match. And in fact, this might have been her best match that she's had on a CMLL big event. I will consider this a big event, since this is a show that they have a title for, which is Copa Junior VIP. Any show that's given a title like Dos Leyendas, CML Aniversario, this being Copa Junior VIP, I'll call it a big show. And I think this was probably Dallas's best performance in a big show in a long time, or if ever, because she's been in a few stinkers. The match with Metallica on the anniversary show. There's been a few others that have been very bad. This one was far better, and I got to give credit to Lluvia as well. She looked a lot better in this match as well. She wasn't. I still think she's not that good, but she wasn't that far off from her partner and Stephanie Vacker. I thought Stephanie Vacker and Jarochita easily is the best female in the promotion right now. Unfortunately, they don't push her at that way. They kind of focus, when it comes to big singles pushes, it's usually still Dallas and Marcella getting the big push. But I think Jarochita, they kind of have to switch over to her, just because the other 2 women have been around for such a long time. Especially Marcella, who's been around since the beginning of the restart of the division. I think they really have to go with, and I think this is a good thing, the fact that they had the titles and didn't have them drop them immediately. I don't think there should be they did it later on, but there shouldn't be as many title changes, especially with people who have won titles recently during this period of the empty arenas, the pandemic. I think this is where they kind of have to use the time to build them up, and I thought they did a great job building La Jarochita and Lluvia up as a tag team. Stephanie Vacker is really good. She did some submission work throughout the match. You could tell she's trained with on the independent scene, because she does a little bit more of that than most of the women that are trained in CML tend to be more. They come across a little more mechanical, and Vacker doesn't. She's far crisper in the ring. So I thought they did really well. For an opening match, I thought it was a good match. Okay. Opener. After that, we get the Copa Junior VIP, which Angel de Oro ended up winning. On Twitter, I accidentally wrote that Niebla Roja won it the first time, but honestly, Angel de Oro, Niebla Roja, you can't really tell them they're brothers. Sometimes you'll mix them up. It happens. Niebla Roja, I should mention Niebla Roja's currently. They mentioned on CML Informa that Niebla Roja isn't traveling as much to work shows. I think he does work a couple of shows, but he'll usually go back to he's living part of the time in the United States because he has family, and so Angel de Oro was the only one representing the the group of Niebla Roja and Terrible in this match, Copa Junior VIP. The battle royale only lasted 2 minutes. I did not pay attention too much to this battle royale, other than just the fact that they really just, I think the one thing, the highlight was really Felino Jr. just jumping out of the ring to team up, to be on the team that had his dad on it. So it wasn't that important. Ultimo Guerrero on CML Informa talked about how important that battle royal determining the two sides in the Torneo Cibernetico was, and I think that's just him trying to keep battle royals existing within CMLL, because they could have done without this and just picked the two teams, coin flips for everyone to decide who was in this match, and which side they would be. But overall, I thought this was this match. A Cubs fan had it timed at 46 minutes. I kind of thought that this match went a little too long. I think he is right on this, because if you include the introductions, it felt like this match went on for like about an hour, and it really felt like that. If it went 46 minutes long, I really think had they cut it down to maybe a 35 minute match, this match would have been a good match, because very early on they were doing a lot of stuff. The guys were trying out a lot of different things. They were doing some different matchups. I thought that was really cool to see. They had Nero Casas confronting Felino, and then later on facing off against Felino Jr. I thought Sobrano Jr. and I think it was Star Jr. who had a little bit of a no, I think it was Sobrano Jr. and Atlantis Jr. that had a little bit of a back and forth. Well, I think for the most part the technicals did a few moments where they were actually going against each other, and it came off really well. But very early on, I think if you watch the first 15 to 20 minutes of this match, you really see what CMLL could really be if they just got rid of all the bad wrestlers on the roster, because these guys were really putting a lot of effort, and not only were they putting in a lot of effort, but they're all very talented. And then like a guy like Dragon Rojo Jr., who is coming back from an injury, he isn't I wouldn't say he's bad, because I actually liked the Dragon Rojo Jr. Pulvera tag team when they were healthy and they were together and doing a lot of work together. But you could kind of tell that the wear and tear of injuries has kind of slowed him down. Not that he was that great to begin with. I would say he's kind of like a middle of the pack wrestler, which, back in, 5 years ago, that was like an acceptable spot. Whereas now being middle of the pack in CMLL pretty much means you're pretty much on the upper echelon of the guys, because there's so many bad workers underneath. I mean, when you have Dark Magic and Okumura, who's been injury riddled as well over the years, and they're kind of working the third or fourth match on CMLL shows, that kind of tells you where Dragon Rojo Jr. is probably going to end up being in those positions as well. But I think you could hide a guy like that on as far as in a Torneo Cibernetico, just because how much is he going to do? He's just going to be in there, do a few spots, and then get out. The one thing I do think is him coming back. I think it kind of hurt some of the other guys, because they kept him in there for a little longer than you really would have wanted him to be in there. I kept looking to see how his return would have affected Felino Jr., because they're really battling. Those two guys are really battling for a spot higher on the CMLL Rudo pecking order, and I kind of thought that they, depending on where they were going to be, it really would determine what whether or not it was worth it to change, especially for Felino Jr. Was it worth it for him to go from Tiger to Felino Jr.? For the most part, early on, I was kind of focusing on Felino Jr., how long he would last in this Torneo Cibernetico, and he kind of ended up going past the first half of the group of guys. So I would say that probably means that he's going to be a little bit higher on, I don't know, maybe I would say it might be possible that he ends up being higher in the pecking order. But, honestly, it being CMLL, you never know what's going on with them because they could just suddenly, for the most part, there's only like a handful of guys that they really focus on in the main event and semi-main event group. And honestly, Felino Jr. kind of is already in that, the third match on the card lineup. So, and for the time being, we're not really getting third match. We're not getting a full 6 or 5-6 match card in CMLL because they're doing mostly TV tapings and these internet pay-per-views that usually don't have a full lineup because of they're trying to limit the amount of people on shows. But what was interesting to me was that Mephisto was the first one eliminated. That kind of surprised me, but they didn't eliminate anybody right away. They waited until about the 12-minute mark, and everybody got to show something in the match. I thought Nero Casas, for somebody who's 60 years old, and given the schedule that the very sporadic schedule that everyone's on right now in CMLL, you have to remember these guys usually wrestled. You basically had Monday, Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday shows, and then they would pick up a couple of indie dates in between as well if they weren't booked on some of the CMLL shows. So usually they would work maybe 3 to 4 shows in CMLL, and then 1 or 2 or more indie shows. So the fact that they're not really getting that right now, they're basically just doing CMLL tapings right now, and who knows, I think they only do a handful per week or however, ever since it's restarted, because they weren't doing stuff earlier on. They're not doing a lot of indie stuff either, so it's not as the fact that these guys were able to do work really well. And Casas, being the age that he is, he looked tremendous. He looked in amazing shape and looked great in the match. So the first one being eliminated, obviously being Mephisto. That was then followed by Felino. Star Jr. was next to be eliminated. Star Jr. looked really good in this match. Also, he had some good chemistry with Felino Jr. That's something that I kind of hope they kind of start to bring in a little bit more of. After Star Jr., Stuka Jr. was eliminated by Nero Casas. The big surprise came up next when Atlantis Jr. eliminated Soberano Jr. with the Atlantida. That really surprised me, the fact that happened. When Atlantis Jr. eliminated Soberano Jr., I kind of thought maybe that meant that he was going to go a little bit further. But I think he might have been another person who was kind of like the victim of Dragon Rojo Jr. being in this match. And maybe that they kind of felt that they kind of wanted to make him look good in this. But I thought maybe Atlantis Jr. would have been in that final 4 in the end. But he ended up not lasting that much longer. Nero Casas was then the other surprise. He was eliminated by Dragon Rojo Jr. Like I said, I kind of thought that Dragon Rojo Jr. coming back kind of felt like he was going to be the one that was going to get a little bit more of a rub. I think he's a guy that's he comes across as a good guy when he does CMLL and Forma, and the times that I've interacted with him, he's been very friendly, very easygoing to deal with. So I get the feeling that maybe he's very well liked by the programming department and the office. So maybe that's also part of and he's coming back from an injury after being out of wrestling for 2 years. So I think they kind of wanted to make him come across as being special. That was then followed by Felino Jr. being eliminated by Mystico. He ended up being 7th eliminated, so he lasted more than halfway. That was then followed by Atlantis Jr. getting eliminated by Angel de Oro. Then we had a weird sequence where Dragon Rojo's mask fell off while he was battling Mystico. I think he was in the Tree of Woe when it just slipped off completely, and the referee had no other choice than to disqualify Mystico. Mystico kind of argued about it. I think Angel de Oro went for a pin on him as well, which was confusing. But that then eliminated Mystico. Caristico then eliminated Dragon Rojo with a cradle. And then finally we get Angel de Oro versus Caristico, with Angel de Oro beating Caristico with his own move, La Mystica. That was a big win. It's kind of funny that he was celebrating with the trophy and doing all this stuff when he really probably should have broken the trophy or said something like not caring about it, since he's now part of a faction that supposedly doesn't care about titles, winning or losing, and here he is celebrating and enjoying it. So obviously this new version of that group is going to be different to the previous one, And we will talk about that after this, because I have a little bit more of a thought as far as what direction that's going and why CMLL decided to bring that group back again. After that match, well, like I said, Copa Junior VIP I thought was a good match. I think had it gone a little shorter, like I said, 10 minutes, it would have been a lot better. I think that might have been the downfall, especially the final sequence, the final couple of minutes. It kind of, the Dragon Rojo Jr. Mystico stuff kind of got confusing, and it kind of like lowered I think there was also the other thing is, I think it's a little bit too predictable. The fact that they went to Angel de Oro, Caristico, Mystico were like the three guys that everybody kind of was picking to either be one of the likely winner of this Copa Junior VIP. I think that's why I thought they should have gone a little bit further with Atlantis Jr. or Felino Jr. kind of being in that final four, because that would have at least been something different. Maybe even, honestly, I think they should have gone Atlantis Jr. all the way to the final with him facing Angel de Oro. That would have been, even if Angel de Oro wins, I think that would have just been something that would have been a little bit different. Just the fact that Atlantis Jr. reached that point, or, had Felino Jr. reached, eliminated Mystico or something, I think that would have actually added a little bit more. To me, the big surprise, like I said, was Atlantis Jr. Eliminating Soberano Jr., who is higher on the pecking order in CMLL, and that kind of surprised me. But I think it was a good surprise. That was then this after that match. That was we were going to witness a battle of Rudos versus Rudos in a trios match for the CMLL World Trios titles, as the Guerreros Laguneros defended the titles against La Nueva Generación Dinamita of Sansón Cuatrero Forastero. Nueva Generación Dinamita ended up winning the titles. This match, I thought the first two falls were absolutely boring. It was funny because when I wrote that on Twitter, someone replied to my comment saying, "Don't watch it." And I hate when people do that to anyone who's watching a show, especially somebody that actually paid to watch the show, and they're giving their opinion of a match, and your response is to say, "Don't watch it." That is, if you're not watching it, shut the fuck up. If you're watching it, give your opinion on why you think the match, you disagree with that person's opinion. That is perfectly fine. But to say don't watch it, I think is really stupid, because obviously no one goes into watching paying for a wrestling show expecting the show to be shit. They're actually hoping that they'll be entertained, hoping that there will be good matches. It's not like you're going to go in there and expect, oh my God, I don't want to watch anything good. And I even said this in the preview to this show, the previous podcast, that I was hoping that this would be a good match. But I already knew more or less that these two trios have a habit of working similar matches against anybody that they work against. We've talked about how often the Guerreros Laguneros, they'll do la periquera, how often they'll do that spot. Every single match, it doesn't matter what it is, clockwork, that move, that spot. And they're not the only people. They're not the only wrestlers that do this. It's not just NGD and Guerreros Laguneros. Ric Flair did this for years. It worked for him. I think the one big difference, obviously, is Ric Flair was doing it in singles matches, and he knew how to work it. It was very different to what these guys are doing, where, it's just kind of like, okay, we're going to this point, then we're going to this point, then we're going to point C, point D, point E, just the same thing over and over again. And even the way they were moving, you kind of knew what they were going to do. And I thought the first two falls were that. I think NGD has a lot more to offer, and they've actually proven it in the past. We've seen Forastero when he teams up with anyone else, when he was getting that little bit of a push against, and I think he was working welterweights at that point in time, like Volador Jr. and Carbonario and those guys, and not so much teaming up with Sansón and Cuatrero. I thought he showed a lot on his own. Same thing can be said about Sansón and Cuatrero when they were feuding with Angel de Oro Niebla Roja. They actually showed a lot that they could do. They had a lot of charisma. They could work. Cuatrero is a really good worker. But the problem is, put them into a trios match and they're sticking to the same formula. I kind of feel like they have to do something a little different. The few times that they've actually kind of like been forced to change a little bit and be a little more of a, just be different as far as what they're doing in the ring, is when they work against the Chavez brothers and Soberano Jr. Those trios matches were really good. But usually when they're working against, the Guerreros Laguneros or certain trios like that, they kind of stick to what they always do. And they're far better than that. I think that they're not that, they should not be the type of trio that sticks to that type of to just being a content with what they're doing in the ring. And that's what I saw in the first two falls. The first two falls were boring. They did a lot of the same stuff they do all the time. The third fall got a lot better. It picked up. The finish was a little bit weak, but I thought the point was that they just wanted to go switch over to NGD winning the trios titles. And now NGD is not only the CMLL World, but they are the National Trios and the Occidente Trios champions. I don't know if they're going to keep all three of those titles because usually CML forces guys who have multiple titles to drop at least one title. So I would not be shocked. And I think they hold more titles besides that. I think they hold singles titles as well. So I would not be shocked if there's some changes to what titles they'll be holding at a later date, with them relinquishing a title, which unfortunately likely means that we'll have another tournament. But it's CMLL. We always get to tournaments anyways. But the other, obviously, NGD winning the trios titles. And then the other big news is Euforia has left the Guerreros Laguneros. That has been something that has been building up since, I guess, since October, November of last year. It's been something that's been going on. And, honestly, I think the Euforia Ultimo Guerrero feud kind of got underrated by a lot of people who may, obviously, CMLL isn't getting especially, it's bad enough that they don't get it when they're actually running shows with fans in it, when they're and having a weekly schedule. But now being during a pandemic where their shows are sporadic and on and off during several months, it didn't surprise me that there wasn't as much of a interest in that feud, or it didn't get as much of a recognition, because Euforia did a really good job of building that rivalry up, and now they're basically now going to feud against. I guess they're going to feud. This is the latest member of Guerreros Laguneros that ends up leaving Ultimo Guerrero. This is basically the time-honored tradition of what Ultimo Guerrero, his trios end up happening every single time. It's basically kind of like a reverse Sting or Hulk Hogan with friends or tag team partners, where those guys would get double crossed at some point by a partner, while Ultimo Guerrero doesn't really get double crossed, but kind of like I guess he does get double crossed, or his partners pretty much quit the faction. We've seen it with Rey Escorpion, Atlantis, Rey Bucanero, and the list goes on and on. Niebla Roja. So many guys. Now you add Euforia. It's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do with Ultimo Guerrero and Euforia. Obviously, they're going to do a singles program for the CMLL World Heavyweight title, which I think should be really good, just because Ultimo Guerrero does. That is the one thing I will say, that when he has those singles matches, he usually does perform well, and Euforia is really good as well. But I'm kind of curious what becomes of them as far as the trios world or the faction world of CMLL. Who does Templario stay full time, replacing Euforia in the trio? Does Templario end up going with Euforia? Does Euforia team up with Soberano Jr., his son, more often? Does Euforia become a full-time technical? That's another thing. Or does he remain a Rudo? That's the one thing I will say. I do hope Euforia stays a Rudo, or at least a tweener type, because losing him to become a technical is going to be hard on the technicals in CMLL, because he's probably the best base in the promotion, and I would hate to see him not be there to base for Mystico, Caristico, Volador Jr., the younger guys that are coming up, just because he's really good at doing it. So hopefully he does. I think I was kind of like, it's funny because I know Euforia, when he was talking about should he break up from Ultimo Guerrero, what would he consider forming a new faction? And he kind of started mentioning some names that he kind of suggested. How about that trio that was going to form in the anniversary, that was going to face the Guerreros Laguneros at the anniversary? Remember, Hechicero and Carbonario were going to team up with Templario, and Templario kind of wasn't too pleased about it. What if Euforia decides to team up with Hechicero and Carbonario, or Hechicero teams up with Soberano Jr.? I think that would be a fun tag team. I think we're seeing more tag team wrestling in CMLL right now. It'd be kind of cool because you could put Euforia and Soberano Jr. as a tag team, and maybe even challenge Caristico and Mystico, or face Ultimo Guerrero, Gran Guerrero in matches. I think that would be something that would be fun. But as far as a trio, would they add Templario to the group, or would they go for somebody else? I think there's a lot of interesting possibilities, and that kind of changes a little bit of CMLL. The hard part right now with CMLL is that they're kind of sticking to the regular crew, so you're not getting any of the young guys that were scheduled to debut prior to the pandemic. So we don't really know what to expect from some. We're not getting some fresh new faces in the promotion. So for the time being, that's basically not that's one of the negatives of not having those guys, a fresh group of guys. Because if you look at the Cubs fan always post the TV lineups, the matches that they're putting on for TV, and it's basically like one show will have like Electrico or what is it, Pequeño Violencia and Pequeño Nitro versus Chacarcito and Astral, and then the other match will be like Dark Magic and Misterioso Jr. versus Soberano Jr. and Star Jr., something like that, and then you'll have like the really good main event. But it's kind of like a weird time to be watching those. Not that it was like that much different prior to that, because they've kind of had the same group for about the last 2 years, and it's not been that strong of a group of late. Really, ever since Dragon Lee Rouge and a couple of those guys left, what was that, 2019? It's really kind of been a lot of a mishmash of a weirdness in CMLL. But hopefully, once the pandemic's over, they'll bring in some of the new guys, like Blue Panther's other son, that tag team, the Gemelos Diablos, that they were going to supposedly bring in. And I think there was at least one more guy that they were thinking of bringing in. I think Hefesto's son might be also starting up pretty soon as well. So we might get some of those guys. But like I said, this trios match, getting back to the trios match, I thought it wasn't very good. It was probably the worst match on the show. It was even worse than the women's match for me. And I don't know. Like, I know it's one thing to be a fan of these guys, but if you're watching this match, you just could tell the effort wasn't there, and the stuff that they were doing was just what you would get from them on any other show. It was like they could have just edited in a Puebla match or a Guadalajara match or a Tuesday match that these two trios might have had. Just put it on there, and it would have been the same match that you would have seen 1,000 other times. Now, speaking of the main event, compared to the previous match, it was like night and day. Volador Jr. versus Bandido was an excellent match. It's easily a front runner for match of the year in Mexico, and probably one of the best matches so far in 2021. Excellent match. Some people might put Hijo de Vikingo versus Ares above this one, but I kind of think this might have been a little bit better for me. As far as, in my opinion, I thought this was a better match. I thought just because there was so much that was done in the match, and you don't normally get that at CMLL, especially coming from Bandido. Excellent. A lot of cool dives throughout. The one negative I thought was obviously there was a botch spot towards the finish, and also the second fall I thought was done pretty much by the numbers, similar to what you get from CMLL big match second falls, where if the first fall is anything like beyond 5 minute range, the second fall is only going to be like a 1 to 2 minute fall, and then they obviously go for a long third fall. This match I think went almost 30 minutes, about 28-30 minutes, and it was excellent. A lot of cool dives, a lot of innovative spots. I think at one point Bandido had Volador Jr. in the Atlantida and then dropped him into like his knee, which looked really cool. It kind of looked like I think it's kind of like an Atlantida into a go to sleep, where it looked kind of like a really cool spot. There was a Spanish fly off the ropes onto the mat, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, there was so many like different dives throughout. The closing minutes of this match were excellent. I think Bandido tried to do a spot that hadn't been done, that he hadn't done. Definitely hasn't been done in CMLL. But it looked like he was going to go for something, and he ended up like not being able to grab hold of Volador Jr. properly and dropped him. And then obviously the big finish was Volador Jr. using the Volador Spiral to get the win on Bandido. I thought that was a cool spot. It's kind of funny because the Volador Spiral was such a big thing back when he was going up against La Sombra and Máscara Dorada, and now and even Misty Caristico back in the day. But now like he doesn't use that as much because obviously two of his frequent opponents are no longer in the promotion, and then the other one is now a Technico, and they don't really face off against each other as much. But I thought that was something that was really cool to see, him bringing that move back. But just a great match overall. Bandido sold the neck injury, and he was going to get stretchered out, but they did the whole thing where he kind of got up, put the belt around Volador Jr. and then walked out. They both raised each other's hands. He had the neck brace on, and he was able to walk out on his own 2 feet with a couple of people helping him out. I thought this was a great match. Hope they do another one, because I think this is something that they can do again. I know a few people said that they hope that they could do this at Ring of Honor at some point, just because there's that relationship between CMLL and Ring of Honor. Who would have thought that would have done wonders? As far as Ring of Honor actually kind of building up Mexican talent in the promotion, really of all the promotions in the United States, they've really been the ones that have kind of like done a lot more with the Mexican talent, because they're pushing Rouge, Dragon Lee, Bandido, Flamita, Rey Horus. So they have even Bestia del Ring is getting pushed. So they have they're using them a little bit better than some of the other places. So to me, the biggest negative about this is that not enough people watch this match where they're going to say that this was a match of the year, because if someone like Dave Meltzer watched it and raved about it on Twitter, in his newsletter, then I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to seek it out. And unfortunately, CMLL didn't make it available. Somebody's going to have to put it up on YouTube at some point just to so that people can see it and maybe consider it for match of the year, because unfortunately when they do those lists for the Observer and other places, it ends up not Lucha doesn't really end up being a very popular choice amongst the readers or voters of those websites. But this was an amazing match, and again, like I said, it shows how good CMLL could be if they just focus on the main good workers or talent. And I don't even think it so much good workers, because even if there's promotions that just because you have a promotion with a lot of good workers doesn't mean that you're going to draw talent, draw a lot of people and to watch the shows. You need guys who have charisma, and maybe they can't work. But the problem with CMLL is that they have a lot of guys who can't work and they have no charisma. So there's no reason to have them in the roster. So to me, that's something that they really have to focus on fixing. So yeah, the other news from the Copa Junior VIP show was that Atlantis made an appearance, and on the show he announced that he would be returning at the next CMLL pay-per-view, which will be on April 24th. It will be a show that will be honoring the Kids' Day, Dia del Niño, and also it will be celebrating the Arena Mexico 65th anniversary. So this should be another big show. I would venture to guess we'll probably get some Atlantis in the match, but hopefully we'll get something. Hopefully Bandido will be available for this. I think Bandido has to be part of the CMLL promotion a little more frequently, especially if they're not going to be using Hechicero as much on TV tapings, because for whatever reason, I know Hechicero's he's got to be somebody that at some point, I don't know if he's healthy right now, because I know he was dealing with some injuries the previous late last year, so I'm not sure if he's 100% yet, but he's somebody that has to be a little bit more frequently on shows. The other guy that actually made his way back to CMLL as far as active duty is Barbaro Carbonario. Last week it was announced that he was making his return, and he actually returned on some recent TV tapings. So he is back. It's probably going to take him a while to get that rust off, because a lot of these guys we've seen, even like the good workers, have had been a little bit rusty. The other thing I should mention before I forget about this, during the Volador Jr. Bandido match, they were on the top rope, the top turnbuckle, and they were talking about, actually I don't even think they were talking about it, but I was remembering the Okumura Flyer match, where Okumura Flyer climbed up to the top rope, top turnbuckle, and they were going to do a Super Frankensteiner, and they both fell off and all the way to the floor, which could have been a horrible accident. Fortunately, both guys are okay. But Okumura was on this past Wednesday's CML Informa and talked about how he really was scared about possibly re-injuring his neck and being forced to, who knows, possibly retire from professional wrestling. Fortunately, he didn't suffer an injury. And like he said, even he didn't know Flyer had also fallen, but it was a scary thing. It being CMLL, of course, it made it onto their TV show. I don't know. It seems it's crazy that they would actually show that. They show a lot of stuff about, with these guys, like where they don't look very professional. Well, Bandido and Volador Jr. did that spot and did something. It was either the Spanish Fly, or they did do the. I think they did do the top rope Frankensteiner, but it was Bandido getting Volador Jr. in the move. So they did do it, and they did not. I think obviously Volador Jr. and Bandido are a completely different level of athlete to what Flyer and Okumura are. And honestly, Okumura probably shouldn't be taking top rope Super Frankensteiners coming off a major neck injury. The other big news this last week, obviously, like I said in the previous podcast, Andrade was released by WWE, and that was actually the big news. And obviously with Ring of Honor also having a pay-per-view, there was a lot of talk about La Facción Ingobernable, with Rush defending the ROH World Heavyweight title, and some of the other members in other title matches. There was a lot of talk about the Ingobernales, and this seemed to lead CMLL into making a decision where they had Angel de Oro and Terrible appear on CMLL Informa, and they announced that their faction, which at one point was referred to as Los Terriblemente Chavez, which was a horrible name, they decided to announce that they were renaming themselves as Los Nuevos Ingobernables, which immediately got a lot of negative feedback from everyone, just because it's nothing original, and pretty much everything that CMLL constantly would accuse AAA of doing, they're now doing. And I don't know. To me, you can't really throw stones at the other place if you're actually doing the same thing. And it's not the first time they do it either. It's been something that's gone on for decades. It's just that people kind of forget. They only remember the good stuff. They don't want to remember all the other stuff that goes on within a promotion. Every wrestling promotion has their issues. Every time I go on Twitter, people are crapping on one promotion and talking about how this other one doesn't do that. But for the most part, every wrestling promotion has a moment, or has a bit of a brain freeze when it comes to certain things that go on within their promotion. And obviously, and their fans are that myopic, where they don't realize that every wrestling promotion has their quirks and their warts of some of the dumb stuff that they do. And I think this is really like something that came off really bad. But at the very least, they actually had Angel de Oro explain that Terrible, having been a member of the Ingobernables previous group, invited them to join the group, and that was the way that they were explaining it. It's still a bullshit explanation, especially because there is no, I don't think CML has any plans of bringing the other guys back in, but it's such a dumb thing. The one thing I will say is that who knows if they could ever reach an agreement to bring back, the other Ingobernables. They could have a full-scale brawl between those two factions, which I think would be entertaining, just because I do think Angel de Oro, Niebla Roja, and Terrible are very good. Angel de Oro and Niebla Roja, it's funny because I actually think they've done a lot more since dropping their masks and have shown a little bit more of an attempt to just be a lot better than what they used to be compared to like the guys who actually beat them for the masks, Sansón and Cuatrero, who kind of feel like they've kind of, they're complacent with what they're doing, which is, very common when if you're in a promotion where complacency is very common up and down the roster. But this Nuevo Ingobernables got a lot of negative feedback from fans. Sombra kind of said he wished them well, like in a way where he didn't really care. And then Rush kind of just retweeted a lot of stuff about, people kind of talking negatively about it. He did kind of say that he was kind of like, he was more upset at the fact that the Chavez brothers couldn't come up with something original that was their own thing. And he was upset that Terrible just didn't continue on his own as El Ingobernable, since he does feel that he is part of the group. So to them, it kind of felt like an insult. But, what do you expect? CML, that's what they're going to do. They wanted to get something in the news during a time when they're doing a pay-per-view. And also, with Andrade and Rush and all these people, and Dragon Lee, everybody kind of being brought up during the week, they obviously kind of felt that they had to bring that up, and maybe that would have gotten them a little bit more people ordering their Ticketmaster live show. I don't know if it actually helped, and because it probably upset more people more than anything else. Chavez brothers aren't very well liked by the fans, and despite them being good, I do think they're good as far as in-ring work, but they're not going to be the type of guys that are going to win over fans just because you have a lot of lucha fans that kind of want the rougher type of guys, or they're guys who are respected for being they either have to be really terrific brawlers or really terrific technical mat-based wrestlers. They're not really there's a certain fan base in Mexico that doesn't really like the high-flying, flippy guys, which might shock a lot of you guys because that's more of something that's common within the United States, that, you have the older generation of wrestling people that don't like that style. But that happens also in Mexico. But yeah, I'm not really that, I'm kind of indifferent to it. I mean, it's just the name. I would have preferred something different for them, but, I did not like the Terriblemente Chavez name. It just sounded really, it didn't really flow properly. Nuevos Ingobernables, I'm not really that high on it either, just because you're just copying another group's name. To me, they could have gone with something else and just called themselves something else. Another thing that happened recently, and this actually happened on Sunday, was that LA Park was challenging Rush to a match where maybe he would put up his ROH title against LA Park's MLW title. And Andrade actually responded to LA Park and told him that he was willing to put his hair on the line against them any place he wanted, as long as he could find a promoter that could pay them well for that match. LA Park then responded saying that he still owed him for taking his nephew's mask, Volador Jr.'s mask. He still owed him for that, so he wanted to get revenge for Volador Jr. against Andrade. So that was actually kind of cool. But like I said, that was the other thing with while they were doing this conversation, the other big news during the week was that Rush, he's been talking about a new project that he's been working on. He revealed on Lucha Libre Online that he is going to be, that project that he's working on is going to be a new promotion that is scheduled to start in June. And he said it's going to be really good. Every time they start a new promotion, they always say this stuff. So I expect this to be said as well. When they eventually give you more details on this, expect them to be very much talking about how this is going to be the hottest thing in Mexico and all this stuff. I don't know why they're starting a new wrestling promotion during a pandemic, especially if they're going to start in June. Mexico is way behind the United States as far as vaccinations, and I would assume they're probably not going to be by June ready to have people attending shows, or at least not having a full capacity of fans in attendance. I would guess maybe they would be at 30% or so, and even then, who knows, because a lot of the I don't know. A lot of these promotions say that they're only doing 30%, and when we've seen a few photos of shows, there's usually more fans in attendance, and all it takes is that one spot to be a super spreader spot, and they'll just shut everything down again. So that's something that they should be worried about as well. But I'm kind of curious to see if LA Park will also be part of this, and obviously Andrade. Rush said that he's not really I don't think he's trying to let that out of the bag where he's going to say, oh yes, Andrade is going to be part of it. He's kind of saying, he's kind of wishing Andrade well, whatever decision he makes. But I have a weird feeling that he'll also be involved in some way with this whole thing with Rush, as far as the new promotion. As long as it doesn't feature Alberto El Patron, then it might be something worth checking out. But like I said, we've always get this stuff about a new promotion coming up, and it usually ends up just falling apart and being something that becomes forgotten a year later. Most recent one, Lucha Libre Elite. The other one, Nacion Lucha Libre. Those two promotions didn't really last that long. Well, that's it for this week. I don't know when we'll do another show. My guess is we'll probably do a show previewing the April CMLL pay-per-view, unless it's something that really is underwhelming. But for the most part, I'll try to preview that, as well as if there's any news, I will do an update on that podcast. I'm going to try to do these a little bit more frequently, maybe, at least one every month, just to make sure that there's something out there that to talk about. There's plenty to talk about, honestly, but, don't want to go months. I think, what was it? The last show in between episode 124 and 125 was about a 3-month period where there was nothing really going on. Not that that necessarily means that we've done this before as well with previous LuchaWorld podcasts. Even when there were shows, we would take a couple of weeks, months off from doing shows just because other things would come up. But I will try to keep a little bit more of a regular routine with this podcast. For more news and updates from the world of Lucha Libre, check out LuchaWorld.com. For wrestling reviews, check out RetroWrestling.com. Check out our YouTube channel called the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, where you will find the LuchaWorld podcast, some retro wrestling reviews, additional content on there. And for more content, you could check us out at our Patreon page at patreon.com/LuchaWorld, where we have Lucha Magazine write-ups, the Lucha Classica podcast, the Video Vault, the monthly Video Vault that features 10 DVD titles every month. We have 3 tiers available at $1, $3, and $5. The $5 reward tier gets you pretty much everything. The $3 one is more of a Lucha exclusive type of thing, because you'll get the Lucha Magazine write-ups as well as the Lucha Classica podcast. But really, the $5 one, you get the Video Vault. So yeah, that's it for this week. Thanks everyone again for listening, and we will be back again soon.